To make this pair of knit wristlets, we're going to use 1 skein of worsted weight yarn, and we're going to use a size 8 set of knitting needles. I'm using circulars because I prefer them, but because we're going to be working in rows, not rounds, you could definitely use straight needles if that's what you prefer. We're going to be using a stitch pattern called the woven stitch, and it's worked over an even number of stitches. We're going to start with a long tail cast on. We're going to need 36 stitches, so I'm going to use a little over 2 feet to start, and we're going to start with a slip knot. So you wrap the yarn around your fingers and then pull a loop through the loop on your fingers. You're going to cinch it tight onto the knitting needle. Then with the tail yarn in front and the working yarn in back, you're going to grab the tail with your thumb and the working yarn with your fingers. We're going to make a loop around our thumb, insert the knitting needle into the loop on our thumb, and pull the working yarn through the tail loop to create a cast on stitch onto our needle. So we now have 2 stitches. The slip knit counts as the first, and that's now the second. We're going to do that for a total of 36 times. I'll do it a couple more times slowly for you to follow along. Okay, that's 10 stitches. We're going to do a total of 36, so go ahead and cast on 36 stitches and we'll touch base again. We now have our 36 stitches cast on, and the edge of the wristlet is done in a variation of the woven stitch we're going to do, meaning that this one's in a stockinette base and this one's in a garter stitch base, and that means the wrong side rows are knit instead of purled. So I'm still going to show you the front side row first. We start with working with our working yarn, not our tail yarn. We're going to start with a knit 1. Then we're going to slip the next stitch with the yarn in back. The yarn's already in back, set up for knitting. We're going to insert our needle into the front of the stitch from right to left and slide it to the right hand needle. There's our slip stitch with yarn in back, and that's coded in the pattern as WYIB with yarn in back. So we'll knit 1, and then we'll slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back, and you just want to repeat that across the entire row. Okay, row 2 is to knit across. So you're going to knit every stitch and every slip stitch as you go. Rows 1 and 2 are done, and now we're just going to repeat rows 1 and 2. That starts with a knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back. So this is row 3, which is repeating row 1. We're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 for a total of 4 times, or 8 rows. So go ahead and repeat rows 1 and 2 until we've reached 8 rows, and then I'll show you how to do the woven stitch pattern. And we'll knit the last stitch, turn our work, and now we're going to purl across the entire row. Okay, next row of the pattern begins with knit 2, and then we'll slip the next stitch with the yarn in front. So we move our yarn to the front, slip the next stitch, move the yarn to the back, and knit the next stitch. And what you'll notice is that this right side row is offset from the previous right side row, so that meaning that the stitch that we slip is opposite the stitch that we knit from row 1 to row 3. And I'll show you that on the existing one right now. See how we go offset, or see how it's offset where we have the slip stitch on every other stitch as we go along. That's what we're doing by alternating which stitch we knit and which stitch we slip from either from one right side row to the next. Okay, and the fourth and final row of the 4-row pattern is to purl across, just like the second row. So every wrong side row in this pattern is purl across. Follow the link on the video to download the free pattern and get more information about the yarn I used, Be So Bold by Kristen Amdahl Yarns.